Hello, and welcome to Tech Latest from Nikkei Asia, where we bring you the freshest updates from the technology sector in Asia. I'm your host, Katey Creel. And in this week's episode, we're joined by Lauly Li in Taipei and Ryohtaroh Satoh in Tokyo to talk about the AI supply chain. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, Katey. Great to be back again.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to have you both here. So in this episode, we're taking a deep dive into the upper reaches of the tech supply chain, where just a handful of little-known companies dominate the production of key materials, components, and chemicals. So they might not be household names like TSMC or Microsoft, but without these companies, Nvidia, for example, wouldn't be able to produce its cutting-edge data centers, we wouldn't have chip production lines running, and iPhones just wouldn't get made. Lauly, can you give us a brief description of the supply chain for, say, an AI chip?
Sure. And actually, this is a rather difficult question.
Yeah, I know. That's just a rough idea.
Yeah, I'll try my best. Okay. So AI chips are a crucial part of the bigger ecosystem. And let's take Nvidia's latest GB200 server rack, for example. It is by far the most complicated server system in the world. The making of just one server rack involves 1.2 million chips, components, and other parts, and 130 trillion transistors, and up to 2 miles of copper cable, and each rack weighs 1,800 kilograms. And if we take a closer look at just NVIDIA's Blackwell AI chip, it involves cutting-edge chip production technologies, advanced chip packaging technologies from TSMC, advanced high-bandwidth memory chips from SK Hynix, Micron, Samsung, as well as some high-end chip substrates from the companies like Ibiden from Japan and Unimicron from Taiwan. And these are just a few examples of the complexity of the AI server supply chain.
That's amazing. That's so many companies in so many countries, all to make one server.
Yeah, that's right.
So throughout the supply chain, there are companies that have come to just dominate in their specific sector. And some of these are huge and very well known. TSMC, for example, as already mentioned, it's clearly the dominant player in advanced chip production. But it's a massive company. It has billions of dollars in revenue each quarter and almost a household name. But once you go further up the supply chain into the kind of chemicals or more specialized parts, the companies are much smaller and more specialized. Is that right?
That is correct. And very often that the upstream of the supply chain has fewer and fewer suppliers that can make it. And I sometimes feel like the supply chain ecosystem is like an onion, that has countless layers. For example, the high-end chip substrates to mount NVIDIA's GPUs on are currently supplied only by Ibiden of Japan and Unimicron of Taiwan due to the high technological barrier. And if we peel the onion down to another level, there are just a few copper-clad laminate suppliers that can make the high-end CCLs to Ibiden and Unimicron. And then further down, there's currently only one company that can supply a special glass cloth that can meet the quality and specs to make such a high-end CCLs.
And what's that company called?
It's called NitoBo. It's a very cute name.
Isn't it?
From Japan, yes.
So what are the pros and cons of this situation where you have a large number of relatively small but ultra-specialized players in your supply chain?
Well, the pros are these kinds of companies usually are dedicated to technology development so that their ability can catch up with their clients' tech advancement, and they are not easy to be replaced.
Right.
But on the other hand, these companies are usually much smaller than their end customers. So when there's an exponential demand suddenly happens, they do not always have the ability or willingness to aggressively expand their capacity to meet the unexpected demand.
I can see where that reluctance would come from because, as you know almost better than anyone, the supply chain and the demand situation can be very volatile for electronics.
Yeah.
Could a major client like, say, Nvidia, just buy up some of these small suppliers and force them to ramp up or encourage them to ramp up capacity?
That is a very good question and also a tricky one. Yeah, I would say it is a question of would you buy and raise a cow just to get the milk? And also, I think the question really depends on what your goal is.
Mm,
If your goal is to get its technology, then perhaps acquiring the company may be an option.
mhm.
But if your goal is to get more supplies to unlock the supply chain bottlenecks, then qualifying a second or even a third source will be an option too, because there will always be newcomers willing to take a chance to get into the game. And let's not forget that an Nvidia GB200 server system has some 1.2 million chips, components, and parts, and there will always be bottlenecks in the production process come and go, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's not buying one cow, it's buying hundreds of cows to make sure you have enough milk.
Yes, that's
I
right.
see. Let's talk a bit more about NitoBo. It's the company that you and Ryohtaroh covered in your recent feature. Full name, NitoBo. Ryohtaroh, could you tell us a bit more about the company, how it got its start, and what role it plays in the tech supply chain today?
Sure. As Lauly said right now, there's a relatively unknown Japanese glass material supplier has been one of the biggest talking points in AI chip supply chain. It has about 100 billion yen in annual sales, so it's not a biggest company in Japan, but it's much smaller than big players such as JSR or Shin-Etsu.
Mm.
You talked about the roots of the company. It has roots in textile factory built in 1898.
Oh, wow.
It's a very old company. It's somewhere between the first Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War.
So it's evolved quite a bit since then.
Yeah, it is. It has. So I think it must have been a surprise even for NitoBo to have this kind of rapid demand from AI chip companies.
Mm.
The source of the popularity of the company is one, this special glass product, tea grass, which is currently facing demand. And this is the most high-end glass material. It's used for high-end chip substrates. But currently, there are no significant rivals for these products. So prominent chip suppliers, which Lauly already mentioned, are coming to this one specific company and asking them for more supply.
Suddenly painfully popular.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing it evolved from a regular textile maker to such a niche high-tech supplier. And I think even more amazing is that it's not the only example of this kind of company in Japan, where there's several companies that are maybe not as well known as they should be, but they're playing this crucial role in the global tech supply chain.
That's right. It's not so much a news to tech readers, but Japan is home to many companies that has a small niche, high market share products, including in materials such as photoresist and silicon wafers. And you might also know the big names like the Mitsubishi Chemical, Sumitomo Chemical, Shin-Etsu, as I mentioned, and Tokyo Oka. But there are all these hundred, maybe thousands of small companies supplying these big chemical makers. And these sort of web onion, as Lauly put it, of suppliers, majority are very small size, few dozens or 100 employees. That sort of small companies are in Japan.
That's amazing. It really speaks to how complex the tech supply chain is more than anything. Is anyone worried that these small companies are becoming takeover targets, given their increasing importance and just how much money companies overseas or elsewhere have?
Yes. I think this might overlap with the Lauly's answer, but I think the general interest is there. After the AI boom, many of the foreign overseas investors are noticing these small, relatively high value companies. And I've heard some companies say there are requests for acquiring or investing in their company. But I think most of the Japanese companies are not so much tend to not to jump on the bandwagon, whether that's a good thing or bad thing. But some are family owned, making them more difficult to acquire. And I believe these companies tend to be a more long-term thinking. So they have like hundreds of history in their companies, and they see lots of up and downs, especially because they're a chemical company. They are the most upstream supply chain. So they seen lots of demand from the downstream companies, but they always see the demand suddenly disappearing once the market contracts. So
right, then they're left holding the bag.
Yeah,
it's understandable that they might be a bit reluctant to expand so quickly. I mean, on the surface, Nvidia's phenomenal growth and share price rise is impressive. But if you're worried that trying to keep up could cause your own company to go bankrupt, then I think I might be a bit conservative too. Speaking of Japan's chip ambitions more broadly, with TSMC setting up plants in the southern part of the country and the government backing startup Rapidus, do you think having these hidden champions in the supply chain will help the country get back into the chip production game?
Right. The chip supply chain, as we mentioned, is overlapping many countries, many regions. So one equipment, one material would go to Taiwan, go to Japan, and then go back to Southeast Asia, that's so on. So maybe not having one critical material, maybe not enough to boost the manufacturing investment here. But I would like to hear Lauly's take on this.
Sure. Okay, just in my 2 cents. I think one of the key reasons that Japan has so many hidden champions in materials, chemicals, and equipment was because the country was once very strong in semiconductors. And these hidden champions are very critical to global semiconductor industry today. And they are definitely very solid foundation for Japan's ambitions to get back to the game. So just in my personal opinion, I think it actually gives Japan a very good head start to revive its chip industry compared to many other economies that has less foundation or less experience to build this complicated industry.
That makes a lot of sense. And also, I suppose having this kind of rich heritage of cutting edge material development and R&D, it does attract more than just the manufacturing, but also more just research and development efforts as well.
Yes, agree.
Well, thank you so much, guys. That was a really fascinating dive into not only the AI supply chain, but a bit of Japan's history and ambitions. Thanks again, and hope to have you both back on the show soon.
Thank you, Katey.
Thank you very much.
That's all for this week's episode. For more of Nikkei Asia's tech coverage, visit asia.nikkei.com. You can also subscribe to our weekly Tech Asia newsletter, which will be delivered to your inbox every Thursday. Thanks again for listening, and check back with us next week for more updates on the tech trends that matter.